Hey guys, welcome back. BDCKR here. We're back with our weekly Q&A content. This is season 12, episode 18. You are either on YouTube or you are on a podcast app or you have...
choose your own adventure. This is a second person story.
Yeah.
You are...
If you are on YouTube, refresh the video and just keep refreshing it and keep watching ads over and over again. And if you're on the podcast app, tell your best friend about us and force them to watch us on YouTube and tell them to, well, I guess if they're watching this episode, then they're refreshing the video anyways. Or I guess you're watching it on some other platform. You've illegally ripped and stolen our content. You violated our copyright and you're listening to this in some format that is not condoned by us. But there's not really anything that we can do to stop you.
It's true.
Or something else that I haven't even thought of. There's so many things. There's so many possibilities. The thing is that life seems very simple at a surface level, but the deeper you dig, there's so many nuances and possibilities, and there's so many things that I can't even imagine. So I don't know how this video is reaching you.
Sometimes we like to fix these things in time by mentioning what's actually current.
Yeah.
In the news, and currently we are starting to record this a few minutes after the first polls are closing on the U.S. election between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump.
Yeah.
So best wishes to our American friends. We hope that things turn out peacefully.
Yeah.
Whatever it is. I mean, I guess I don't know what our audience is like. I'm hoping that they are more open-minded and progressive socially.
Well, I mean, I feel like our politics it's not like we talk about them constantly, but we talk about them enough, and I think they show up in the stuff we do. It should be pretty clear that we are not Democrats or Republicans because we're not Americans, but we're also not, broadly speaking, like liberals or conservatives. But out of the options, we like the more liberal, more progressive option as best as it's available. Yeah. And so I think that should give people a good sense of where we'd be voting, but also where we might have disagreements with sort of everybody who's an option, right?
Right. So after talking last week about how I thought we'd run out of teams, because this is the season. Season 12 is the second season where we've had a really strong theme. And this is the season of the old favorites, right? The best teams. People often ask us, who are the best teams? In fact, people have been asking us even during our weekly recap saying, well, what are the best teams? You should use different players. And we have been doing it for this entire season. I thought last time would be, I was running out of ideas. And I just realized, no, Arkham Origins Batman. Mm-hmm. Holy smokes. Started playing with him again. I've gotten away from playing with him because, doing the challenge stuff, I'm forcing myself to use characters I normally don't. And Arkham Origins Batman, I think in the current landscape, he is woefully underrated. He is still a powerhouse. He's not just underrated because he's good and people aren't picking him. It's because he's great. And the biggest thing, I mean, usually how we normally look at it is at people's passives and their special too, and then sort of other factors, and we'll get to that. But I think part of the reason why he's overlooked sometimes is his passive might seem like it's not that current. But listen, he's got 2 bars of power when he comes in. He's got a 3-hit special too, and there's not enough spacing in between to hit 2 opponents. You can only hit 1 opponent with those 3 hits. But the damage is equally distributed among the hits so that the first hit can knock out an opponent. And what it does, even though the next 2 hits won't do anything to the next opponent tagging in, the animation of the following hits can be enough to prevent a tag-in effect from the opponent, even if there's no damage. So that makes a huge difference in fights where people are just, your opponents are just itching to come in and do something to you as they tag in, whether it's steal your power or stun you or whatever. His teammate is Arkham Harley Quinn. And she's mostly there for the unblockable special too. And a little sort of history for those of you who haven't been playing long enough. I believe that Arkham Harley Quinn used to have only one element to her passive, which was to boost the health. And now now the newer version of her has that ability to give her Arkham teammates an unblockable special too. And the classic version of this team, based on both the packs and also based on the characters, was to have Arkham Origins Deathstroke as a third team member, because Deathstroke also has a powerful special too, taking advantage of Arkham Harley Quinn's passive. But there aren't enough gears for both Arkham Origins Deathstroke and Arkham Origins Batman to do a lot of special twos. And you think, okay, so Arkham Origins Batman already starts with 2 bars of power. Maybe he doesn't need anything to generate power, but I think with the kind of teams that you're facing where there's a bunch of revives and you benefit from tagging your teammates in and out and sort of sharing the damage duties with Deathstroke, there's just aren't enough gears, I think, to get them both, make them both useful. So Arkham Knight Batgirl is the better alternative because she's able to quickly give us a do-over if Arkham Origins Batman is knocked out. So she effectively gives us maybe not a second character, but she gives us a second chance. And what you do is get at least one more tag in with him and a special 2 that is good enough for knocking anybody out.
Yeah.
So his third gear is Claw of Horus. And what you'll see is, because I think most of the Batman have a really good special 1 that has potential for multiple special effects at the end of it. So he's almost never misses. He shatters at least 1 gear when he's got Claw of Horus when he does a special 1. So it gives him the flexibility. And you're seeing when he tags in, right? So he tags in, he's, instead of having just the 2 bars of power, because we give him Enchanted Totem and Master's Death card, he gets the 3rd bar power from Master's Death card. He may not get more power from 3rd bar power from Enchanted Totem, but he may not get the power from Master's Death card, but he gets the advantage of, on the tag in, that the opponent's not blocking on the immediate tag in. And so it really sort of opens him up to make him even better. So let's say you're facing Black Knight Martian Manhunter. And he's got the defensive thing for the first 2 seconds. You know what? Shatter gear. You've got the 3rd bar, you use it. And then the 2nd and 3rd bar, the 2 bars, the other 2 bars you use up to just knock him out after you've killed a bit of time. Or you've got somebody who maybe has Astral Harness. You can either try to time it perfectly, do a couple of special ones, shatter 2 gears, hope that you have the 2 and 3 chance, right, that you shattered Astral Harness, and then launch your special 2. And again, it sort of takes away a few of those edge cases that maybe make it a little bit harder to take advantage of Arkham Origins Batman, because he is so fast. I mean, he is fast enough that sometimes this is a scenario that if you've played against Injustice 2 Superman, you'll see is that he can even do a special 2 sometimes after he removes Injustice 2 Superman's shield, even if Injustice 2 Superman has a bar of power, because oftentimes Superman will be just fast enough no matter what you do to try to get him. So sometimes he'll still beat you, but the fact that it's even possible for Arkham Origins Batman to do it just is a testament to just how fast Batman is.
Yeah.
And just as a bonus, because you're watching this, what I'm going to do is stick in a fight where Killing Joke Joker is the first character on the opponent's team. And again, usually supers prioritize before any specials. So if your opponent's got 3 bars, they tag in. You want to do a special? Haha, they will do a super. We actually take out that whole team. No problem at all. It's either going to be right at the beginning of the video that you just watched, or it'll be at the end of it.
So there we go.
Yeah.
Nice. One thing, quickly before we get into the questions, I believe I had mentioned that I was reading Jade City before.
Yeah.
And I've now finished Jade War. I think I'll have a wrap up with my thoughts about the whole trilogy when we're through them, because you read these books, you really, really enjoyed them, and you recommended them to me.
Oh, yeah.
And I really, really enjoyed these books. They're super readable. I think I've talked about before how like the tempo and the pacing is really good. Yeah. And what I like is that there's a real build up. It feels like over the course of the books that there's sort of a slow-ish start, not slow, but like the build up to the sort of the big bombastic moments that happen at increasing rate as you get into the book that feel really earned because it's not just all action all the time.
Right.
It feels like there's a real sense of rising tension. And I think the second book starts at sort of a slightly elevated place of tension compared to the first one. And especially because you can sort of jump right into it a little bit faster. But the second one still has that real flow to it. I really enjoyed both of them. Yeah. I found that they get better the deeper in you get, for sure. Well, and I'm really excited to see how the third book, which I've just started, but like barely like 1 chapter in, sort of sticks the landing.
Because it's a different skill, right? Having good sort of action set pieces is one thing. But then to build up the emotional investment that you need to make them really count for something.
Yeah.
Like there's a much bigger payoff when that happens if you spent the time setting it up properly instead of just action.
Yeah.
We're committed to these people, right? To this family.
Well, because what I really like about it is that a lot of the characters in the story are smart and competent and have literally magical powers, right? And so I think, and then in different moments, you see them do these things that feel really cool and like they have real sort of, I don't exactly want to say hero moments because they're not exactly heroes, but they have real sort of moments of triumph and prowess and everything. Yep. And I think it would be easier for you to feel like it's kind of like, what's it, like a Mary Sue character where it's just, oh, this person's good at everything and cool and whatever, right? But the moments that they are sort of at their best feel few and far enough between that you feel a real sense of, and they also, everybody in this is sort of going through it, right? Everybody's being sort of battered and they're facing what feels like if not insurmountable, then at least like really difficult odds, and there's a real sense of like stakes that is pretty visceral. So when they have those moments,
there's real jeopardy.
Yeah, it feels less like, oh, these guys are cool and they have life easy and they're super powerful and they're just so smart that they're always, overcoming everything. And it feels there's a catharsis to it, to letting them sort of operate at their best for those brief moments. That makes it feel a lot more satisfying and a lot less like, oh, well, if you just give us a really cool smart guy magical powers, of course he's going to do cool stuff all the time, right?
Yeah.
So
it's one of my favorite books. Yeah, it's as an adult, I think that series is among my favorite books. The only other things that I would rank as high is maybe the Expanse. Yeah. It started off with Leviathan Wakes. There's not a lot of books that I've enjoyed nearly as much.
Exceptional book as well, yeah. So that's my recommendation, is definitely Jade City and Jade War. And on your recommendation, you could recommend Jade Legacy.
Easily. The Greenbone Saga is so good. I think it's been optioned, and if we get anything close to what we deserve...
Oh, that would be incredible.
This would be, I think, on par, and because it's shorter, I think they can finish it better, on par with the Game of Thrones.
Yeah, I think that's always a question of how well it can be executed, but there's definitely a very rich sort of source to pull from for that. And then I also mentioned it, but I just finished watching Severance for the second time. Super exceptional show, and I'm only mentioning it again because I think it ties in a little bit with that sense of escalation and tempo, where rewatching it, I knew I was really enjoying it, but the last episode of Severance is so good, and obviously all shows and stuff in media build up, right, to sort of their climax.
Right.
But in a very real way, and in a lot stronger way than most shows do, it feels like the entirety of the season, like almost everything that happens in the entirety of the first season of Severance is building to that like last 20 minutes of the last episode.
Right.
Where, it's not just that like, oh, this is the culmination of the arc of the season. It almost feels like it's a bunch of puzzle pieces falling into place.
Right.
Instead of, a story that has a beginning, middle, and end. And there's, lots of other stuff that happens there. It feels really like tight and tautly paced. And it feels like it's using like, the metaphor I want to use is like it's using every part of the cow almost, where it's taking all its runtime and all the little other stuff. And I also think that it ends up being able to be a better thriller, because for a lot of it, it's almost kind of on the nose. Like, it's not a super subtle show, but because it's so weird and offbeat and strange, it kind of lets you sneak those feelings in, and it doesn't feel as tropey or like it's trying to manipulate your feelings or tug at your heartstrings, even when it is sort of very straightforwardly letting you know what it wants you to feel and what it wants you to see and all of that stuff in a way that I think, if it wasn't so well executed, would feel lazy and cheap in a different show. But the way that it all comes together can be, kind of obvious while also still very, emotionally resonant.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So our first comment of the week comes from QXC. 7434. I did not say it wrong, but it's just because I know, even though I don't enjoy XQC's content, I know of him. So it's that pattern recognition part of my brain that sees three letters that are the correct three letters to be something else that makes me want to reorganize it. And that is, like I've said before, not fair to QXC. They say, And this is replying to those weird auto replies that we're getting from AI recommendations from Google. To be fair to the auto replies, it probably learns from other online interactions, which, for the most part, are very confrontational, even when it is a creator-to-audience interaction. Also, I just caught the episode where you responded to mine in another comment complimenting you guys, and I have to say the points you brought up after hit very close to home. And then in brackets, feeling undeserving when someone's being complimentary and experiencing backhanded compliments. I've gotten quite a few, quote, "You're so well-spoken." Quote, "I thought you were a insert colorful insulting label here when I saw you, but then I got to know you." People love throwing the word actually in there too, because I guess they're surprised when I say something they think is smart or thoughtful, lol. Always makes you laugh, and I do appreciate the intent at the end of the day. Amazing vid, as always. So, we'll reply to this comment specifically, but another thing that's kind of funny is that this had auto replies for us. Right. So do you want to read them?
Yeah, so it said, "It's always heartwarming to see people trying to understand AI." That was one option. The other option was, "Yeah, it's all about intent. I'm just glad I could help."
I do think it's funny specifically that the AI recommendation, first off, this is one of the most positive opportunities to respond that we've gotten. So I think one of the cues here, or piece of information that we're learning, is that the replies are at least in part sort of tone moderated by the comment itself. Mm-hmm. And so what you can see here is that this comment has a very clearly positive tone, right, because the AI is responding in kind, and both options here are directly positive in a way that they usually aren't.
Yeah.
So that's kind of your AI tone analysis is saying that that this comment is very complimentary, which I would tend to agree with.
So, and along those lines, one thing I've noticed, not in here, but in other areas, is where, actually maybe here too. That's when people come at you or are commenting on a post or, responding to something, and they do it with assuming bad knowledge, assuming bad faith, and they come attacking. Mm-hmm. And then when you come back at them with the same kind of heat, but with, the actual facts, and it's, they're wrong, and then they recognize they're wrong. Some people are reasonable. Not often. Some people are reasonable and say, they acknowledge, I made a mistake. Sorry about that. And then there's that specific interesting group of people that will come back and say, well, that's fine, but you should be more polite.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be so rude. And it's funny to me because, along those lines of the comment last week, right, about the language of the abuser, I'm trying to, in my mind, I think I'm making connections that maybe aren't necessarily there, but in my mind, I think, that's a little bit of the language of the abuser too, right? You're supposed to take it, but you're not supposed to give it.
Yeah.
And somehow you're wrong for responding the way that somebody else initiated. Like somehow it's always better to turn the other cheek, take the high road when they take the low road, mm-hmm, all that kind of stuff.
I think it's interesting. There's sort of an uneven dynamic created between fans or people replying to somebody who's making something, mm-hmm, and the creator of that thing, where in each individual case, you have somebody who is clearly in a position of more power, influence, whatever, right? Mm-hmm. In a space, which is the person making it. But then in aggregate, you can often see that relationship flipped where, even if no one individual comment is super horrible, you can have this sort of mass of comments that are all mildly negative to the point where it is just this wave of sort of faceless harassment, right?
Yeah.
Where there's one quote unquote real person in the interaction, right? Which is the person who has made the thing. If it's
right,
a video where their face is out there, right?
Right.
There's sort of one figure that's kind of the lightning rod for all the discussion. And then there's a bunch of people who are, and again, there are real people behind the screen, but I think often they're interacting more like it's sort of this online discussion space, and they're not reacting like they are saying something to a person, mm-hmm, right? Mm-hmm. And so they're faceless. They don't have sort of the same stuff associated, they're not putting themselves out there the same way. They're not. Yeah. They're very obviously a real person, but for all intents and purposes, they are a little sort of bubble with a picture in it and some words, right?
Well, it's a drive-by thing, right? When you're in somebody else's space, you don't have as much committed to the interaction as a person who is there permanently.
Yeah. And it's a strange dynamic. I find myself feeling really disappointed and angry sometimes when I'm on a platform like TikTok or something, because I'll see people be really cruel in the comments. And they'll be, you know, homophobic or ableist or, you know, mean to somebody about their appearance or whatever.
Yeah.
And, you know, each individual person is just clearly like they've lost the ability, or they don't have the ability in this situation to have empathy for the person that they're talking about and also talking to. And so it's hard for me. It's a hard balance. And, I don't really know what the answer is, because we've created a really artificial sort of way of interacting with people, right? Because that is not, in terms of how the human brain works and is used to processing social information. This is not like a real social scenario that your brain is built to process. It's so different from like what real socialization is like, and you kind of see how, you know, that's the joke, is that like you, or not the joke, but like the thing people say is like, oh, well, you wouldn't say that to my face. And it's true, right? There's a lot of people who can do stuff that they really would not be willing to do or say if they were interacting with somebody in like the way that our brains are meant to, like face to face as people.
Right.
So,
So I want to speak to what QXC was saying here about how, and I think it's a very valid response to, you know, quote, always makes me laugh, and I do appreciate the intent at the end of the day regarding backhanded compliments and like legitimate compliments. But I think the part I'm going to focus on is the backhanded stuff, where people are inadvertently hurtful.
Yeah.
Right? A totally healthy way of dealing with it, right? When you laugh at it and, you know, appreciate what they mean. But I guess the other way that sometimes, depending on what mood I'm in, I like to do is to actually try to fix them.
Yeah.
So just to let them understand, to recognize, because it goes back to other stuff, right? Like, not that these are necessarily, like you said, their intent is good, or they're well-meaning, but depending on the day, I feel there's a kinship sometimes of those people with actual abusers and people with bad intent. Because if you just leave it, then they get to believe that they are still the hero of the story, right? That there's nothing wrong with what they do, and then they don't learn. And if the older you get, the more entrenched you get in what you do, the harder it is to make changes. And I think, listen, you have no obligation to do that. But if you feel like it, sometimes it lets you be sort of a force for good and change. If people who are like that recognize, oh, maybe I shouldn't do that, or I can do it better. Yeah. Who knows? A lot of times they'll never learn. And sometimes I'm just itching for a fight.
Yeah, but I think that's one of those things where the balance of it is that you have to make them not feel defensive usually for it to reach them. Yeah. And I would definitely use less strong language than you in terms of abuser, because it's obviously very situation dependent.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. I
think that there's a kinship with abusers.
That's meant to be inflammatory a little bit, but I think that it's helped me understand it a little bit, because in ways it's very manipulative.
Yeah,
where what you're trying to do is reserve the space for grace for yourself only. When they're the person saying, they say something that's inflammatory, and then their only defense is really, hey, you shouldn't be so mean about it.
You get sort of some plausible deniability as the person giving a backhanded compliment. And that's where I think intent is really important, because I think there's two ways that backhanded compliments play out, right? Which is that there can be people who kind of have this mixed opinion of you, who are taking a little bit of a swipe at you and on purpose while they're doing it. And the other one, which is, you know, kind of unfortunate, but I think a lot nicer, is when they're being honest, they do have a good intent, and they're just kind of stumbling over their words a little bit. Because, you know, you're not going to appeal to everybody, right? I think if people have strong feelings about you, there's a capacity for those feelings to be positive or negative, right? I think in general. And so if there's somebody who, you know, had a bad first impression of you, has these sort of like mixed feelings about you, and then is genuinely trying to sort of express that of like, oh, you know, initially I didn't really know if I was going to like you, but getting to know you, I really have. That's in a way kind of a better compliment to receive, because there's some people who are just going to like what you've got going on no matter what, right? Like, I don't know what the percentage is, and it depends for different people. I know there's definitely people in my life who I would consider like more easily likable than me. They're just super sociable and personable. And I'm not saying that to put myself down, right? I'm simply saying that as like a statement of fact. I think that I know people who, if you surveyed the average person, the vast majority of people would get along with, would be a fan of. Right. And I don't consider myself to be that like 99th percentile, like top whatever likability. I don't know exactly where I fit, but
I'll freely admit I can be prickly.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And so I don't think it's a bad thing to be aware of that. And so, you know, a compliment from whatever, like the 10, 15, 20, 30%, whatever percentages of people who are going to get along with you just at a baseline level are nice, but you kind of already have those people in your corner. I think there is something to be said for that sort of no man's land in the middle, where depending on the day or your interactions, you could swing between somebody getting along with you and not getting along with you, and having one of those people sort of come around to and like what you got going on is in a way actually, I think, a little bit more meaningful than just the people who you'd have kind of on your side no matter what.
Yeah, I think though the structure allows for both possibilities, that it's somebody who's being like, it doesn't take much to change it from something benign or even positive to say, you know what, you've really turned me around. I didn't have a great first impression of you. Yeah, that's inoffensive. But when some people say, you know, the part where there's I thought you were a whatever. Insult, yeah, and that's sort of, to me, that's like Ricky Gervais in his TV show, that Netflix one where Afterlife, where it's really just a vehicle to give him a chance to say like really bad things, like really crappy things to people, as an excuse, because his character is a widower. His wife recently died. And so I think some people are just reveling in the opportunity to say, oh, I thought you were and insert whatever swear word bad thing here. And so there's a difference, right? Yeah. Like there's that structure allows the room of, I guess, a variety of kind of possibilities. Like I said, it depends on the day. Sometimes I feel like having a fight. Sometimes I don't.
This is going to be poorly attributed multiple times, because this was a video I saw of somebody talking about a book, and I don't remember the person who was talking.
Do you remember the book?
And I also don't remember the book. But I saw somebody talking about, and I also don't remember exactly what they said, so this is not even a full paraphrase.
But it's the idea that you picked up from it. So
the idea that I picked up is that when you are making a joke at somebody's expense, or making a joke that could be considered mean, the difference between it being a joke and the difference in like bullying or harassment is if you have previously affirmed that person in that dimension. So, you know, I have a lot of queer friends, right? If I make a joke about them being queer, it only is funny if I've affirmed their identity as queer and I've shown my support for them, right? So I can joke around with them in a way about their, you know, sexuality, gender identity preferences, because I have shown them support and respect and validated them in those identities, right? I've made them secure in those with me, and they know that they're safe with me and that I support them for that. And so I have the space to say some stuff that I could not say to somebody with the exact same identity markers as a stranger on the street. Because if I said it to a stranger on the street, they would not be able to tell my intent. It wouldn't be obvious. It would be a joke. It would just be harassment, right? Or not harassment necessarily, but, you know, it wouldn't be...
it would be abusive.
Yeah, they wouldn't have a sense of safety and comfort with me, and they wouldn't know where I stand.
It's the opposite of, you know, it's only funny because it's true, which is a line I like to use sometimes when people say something uncomfortable, but it's the opposite. It's only funny because it's not true. And it's got to be obviously not true in order to be funny. Because if there's even a hint of that it could be taken like literally and not jokingly, because really that's the other thing, right? Like this is another sort of common strategy of the abuser. Say, I was just a joke. Can't you take a joke? And you don't want to be the person who is resorting to that. You should know better than to try it and fail. You really need to know that it's going to land properly before you even try it.
Yeah, one thing that I've seen that I can quote properly is there's Anthony Jeselnik, who's a comedian. I haven't seen much of his stuff, so I honestly don't have an opinion about him as a comedian. Right. But quoting Andy Warhol, which is, art is getting away with it. And so I think Jeselnik is supposed to be a pretty offensive comedian. And his point is that if you say something and everybody gets mad at you, you haven't gotten away with it.
Right.
That if you're being offensive just for offensiveness sake, that you're not being a good comedian.
Right.
If you're offensive and people walk away from the show being like, oh my gosh, can you believe all the stuff that guy said? It was really funny though.
Yeah.
Then you've gotten away with it. But if a significant percentage or a majority or even just like enough people, right, are walking away from that going like, that was crappy, right? Yeah. You can't be offended that people are mad at you. You haven't done your job as a comedian. You haven't gotten away with it. And so that means you need to be doing something different.
Yeah. I think a less punchy way of just saying it is that if you're just not successful, like you've just done it badly if people are offended.
Yeah.
Like you're not a comedian. Like that's, well, if you are a comedian, that's not the fun part.
Well, you're not doing your job right. Yeah. So I think that's a decent place to end it off with. One thing I just want to leave as a thought experiment, and this is super hard, and I don't think anybody's solving this, but we talk about sort of the ways to be kind to each other, the ways to approach each other, and the ways that the internet and also sort of some forms of communication can muddy that and make stuff less ambiguously good. It's an interesting thought experiment to think, you know, on the internet specifically, but just more broadly, how do you give people a space where they do show up with empathy, where they do interact with people like they're face to face, where is there a way to set up a space that makes you see the people that you're interacting with more as people and motivates you to sort of interact more positively?
I think absolutely yes, because I've experienced it, but it'd take me a while to break down why it happens. Because I remember on one Discord, and the person who runs it has made a conscious decision to run it a certain way. Yeah. And everybody is kind to them. There's even a channel specifically where people who are having something bad going on can just talk about it, and the whole idea is people will be sympathetic to them in that channel. Yeah,
those are like vent chats, and those are in a lot of small community discords. I think, you know, when you're curating a group of friends or people who are close, who have some sort of like active connection to each other, that's one thing. But I think if there is a way to do that sort of just passing by in like a more sort of social media algorithmic feed way, that would be so good for people's brains and psychology. And so obviously hugely difficult question, but I think that's something worth thinking about. And I would love to hear if anybody has any thoughts about that in the comments. And I mean that in a real way. We don't, you know, just tell people to comment what you think. What's your opinion? This is something that I actually think I would really like to hear what people have to say if you have thoughts.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So that does it for this week. To finish up, we'd like to give a huge thank you to all of our lovely patrons on Patreon.
And that would be Michael Devries, Irvin Ruiz, Hoshi127, and Nora Klimek, who are supporting us on the credit level.
Yeah, talk about people who see us as the people behind the screens and are interacting with us in positive ways that we love. We'd also like to give a huge thank you to all of our lovely commenters who do the same thing. In general, we've got a very nice, warm community here. And
and then finally, our viewers, too.
For people. Yeah, even if you're not commenting, I guess, you're probably still pretty cool. I don't know. I can't say for sure. I'll give you
unless you hate watching or hate listening to us.
I'll give you a soft endorsement, but like you can't use me as a reference.
There you go.
Okay, so there we go. Thank you so much for however you're interacting with us, and we'll see you next time.
Komoda.